Excellencies, honorable ministers, members of the diplomatic corps, our dear hosts, representatives of the government of Philippines, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, let me thank the government of the Philippines for hosting this international conference. Judging by the overwhelming interest in this conference, attracting now from our estimates last night over 1,200 participants from all over the world, this ranks as the best international conference UNIDO has organized since I took over as Director General. I am particularly grateful to President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo for making it possible to convene this conference in Manila. I would also like to express my heartfelt thanks to Secretary Atienza for spearheading the excellent preparations for the conference and to his hardworking and dedicated staff. I very much appreciate the presence here today of ministers and high-level representatives from 22 Asian countries. Let me thank our partners in the UN family, UNEP, UNSCAP, and ILO for joining in this endeavor. With the participation of so many eminent experts, representatives from government and the business community, academia and research, as well as from civic organizations, the media and the United Nations system, I am confident that we will all benefit from a rich and rewarding dialogue over the next 3 days. You might ask yourselves, why a conference on greening industry? And we don't say green industry, but greening industry, because we believe it is a continuous process of greening, and there's a lot to do to green industry. We might also ask ourselves, why ministers of industry and not an environmental conference? This is because we believe that industry is part of the solution to the environmental challenges we face. Industry is part of the solution to the climate change challenges we face. Let me give you 5 quick reasons why we felt, ILO, UNEP, UNIDO, ESCAP, and ourselves, why we felt that this conference was necessary. First, it will provide the government and business community with the opportunity to showcase their technologies, expertise, and experience, as well as their best practices in greening industry. For example, Philippines is the 3rd largest producer of biomass in the world after USA and Brazil, according to the REN 21 report. It also is the 2nd largest producer of geothermal energy after the United States. So we believe that there's some real experiences here in Asia that can be shared. Second, manufacturing industry in Asia comprises about 20 to 60% of GDP. That's the range. Asia contributes about 2/3 of manufacturing exports of developing countries. This emphasizes the importance of manufacturing as a driver of development in Asia and in countries in general. The fundamental issue for Asia is how to sustain rapid economic growth with increasing population and rapidly increasing resource scarcity. Therefore, Asia cannot afford to ignore the issue of sustainability and green industry as a powerful instrument to support this transition. Third, we want to raise awareness of the importance of green industry in Asia in the context of its rapid industrial development and sustainability challenges. Fourth, we want to bring the discussion around the issue of resource-efficient and cleaner production from the technical level, which has been the main mode, to also a political and policy dialogue. The experts who are here see the need for greening industry, but we want to bring the experts together with the politicians and the policymakers. And fifth, we want to move the discussion from the factory floor to the political establishment, but also to the global level, to look at policy, regulatory mechanisms, technology issues, finance, incentives, and also hope that the media will spread the word. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have talked about the Asian powerhouse for manufacturing. When we look at the development challenges around the world, particularly the issue of poverty, we are convinced that based on the Asian model, you cannot fight poverty or reduce poverty without creating wealth. To move a man from $1 a day to $2 a day or $3 a day, that individual is still poor. You will just be managing poverty. To really reduce poverty in the long term, you must restructure economies. Economies must modernize. They must move to the manufacturing sector, add value to their natural resources or produce higher value products. That's the way you reduce poverty. It is not by accident that the richest countries in the world, we call them the highly industrialized countries. The Asian model has shown, and the OECD model, that true poverty reduction requires economies to restructure. That is the message we see in Asia. Asia has lifted, when you add China and India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the other Asian countries that are present here, they have moved almost 200 million people out of poverty within the past 30 years. Nothing like this in the history of mankind. But the message that we see here is that restructuring and moving into higher value production. But we must do this now in the 21st century on a different trajectory, a trajectory of sustainability, a trajectory of cleaner production. When we look at poverty around the world, the demographic challenges we face, we see that if the projections are true that population will increase by several billions, think about it for a minute. If 5.6 billion people in the developing world were to suddenly catch up with the consumption rate of the current rich countries, world per capita consumption rates would increase almost 11-fold. This would be the equivalent of the world's population jumping by 72 billion, just by the consumption habit, if we continue the same consumption habit. Let's put it another way. The New York Times columnist Thomas L. Friedman observed that if the developing world were to add another 2 or 3 billion people to consume as much as OECD countries and the US are doing today, we would need to colonize 3 more planets like the Earth. This is according to Thomas L. Friedman. And if all of the world's people generated greenhouse gases at the same rate as developed countries today, we would need 9 planets to survive, according to even the Human Development Report. So our conference here, we're sending a couple of messages. The consumption pattern must change. The way we use natural resources must change. The way we produce goods and services must change. That's a central message we have here, that the new trajectory of growth and of dealing with poverty alleviation must be a trajectory that is based on cleaner production and resource efficiency. A second message, we must talk about the centrality of energy and energy systems to the current climate problems we face. The World Bank estimates that roughly 1.6 billion people have no access to electricity. In sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, 75% of households, or 550 million people, have no access to network electricity. In South Asia, 700 million people, about 50% of the overall population, and 90% of the rural population are not connected to the grid. You and I know that you cannot be competitive in production if you don't have access to electricity. It is no coincidence that the 2.5 billion people who live under $2 a day also happen to be those that have limited or no access to electricity. There is a direct correlation between income poverty and energy poverty. If we are to keep our economies growing at 8 or 9%, we need access to electricity. We need access to energy. But again, we know that energy-related greenhouse gas emissions account for about 70% of total emissions, and this is expected to grow by 50% by 2030. Think about it. We want to grow faster, we want to create jobs and prosperity for our people, we need energy, but we better not choke ourselves. So the role of renewable energy in the energy mix becomes significant. But a second dimension of energy is energy efficiency. We must promote energy efficiency. The energy we save is the best fuel we have because there's quite a bit of wastage of energy. But let me give you a picture of that. Some analysts have said that suppose we are able to provide electricity to these 1.6 billion people and give each of them 60-watt bulb to light their dwellings. If those 1.6 billion people turned on their 60-watt bulb at the same time and keep them on for 8 hours a day, we would need to generate an extra 96,000 megawatts of electricity or build the equivalent of 192 power plants, each producing some 500 megawatts of electricity. This is just households. The industrial sector accounts for 1/3 of global energy use and 2/3 of global energy and processed carbon dioxide emissions. So the issue of energy efficiency for industry, but also in our own ways in which we use energy at homes, becomes important if we're going to deal with the issues of climate change. So in this conference as well, for industry as well as for households, we want to talk about reduction of the energy intensity of production. There is also significant potential to reduce at low or no cost the amount of energy used to manufacture goods. The reduction potential estimated by the International Energy Agency and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for 5 energy-intensive industrial subsectors ranges from about 10% to 40% depending upon the sector. The International Energy Agency stabilization scenario for greenhouse gas emissions, over a quarter of all energy efficiency gains need to come from the industrial sector by 2050. To deal with this dilemma of achieving growth, prosperity, reducing poverty, at the same time making sure we don't pollute the world anymore, there are several issues that we need to address. Part of the answer lies in growing our economies in a more sensible, sustainable manner. This means doing more of what we are already doing, already starting to do, switching to clean and renewable energy to power our economies and industries, improving the efficiency of our energy, material, and water use, and practicing conservation. We need a fundamental change in how we produce, consume, and exchange goods. This is how we green our economies, our growth strategies, our industries, our transportation systems, our buildings, and our homes. In the process, we will create new green jobs. I am sure my colleague of ILO will talk to you about that. We're very grateful that Juan Sumavia, he could not be here, but he wanted to be here, but he sent us a recording message that green jobs is real. Our colleagues in UNEP have launched the initiative on greening economies. All of us, UNIDO, UNEP, ESCAP, and ILO, are trying to achieve these various green initiatives together. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have said that a number of the solutions exist in Asia. To be frank with you, why the idea to start this conference, to do this conference, started 2 years ago. I was visiting 5 Asian countries, including Japan, India, China, Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia. And all along, as I spoke to the ministers of industry, the issue of sustainability was paramount on the agenda. So I said to my colleagues, let's look at greening industry in 2 years. Because I also sense from them that their researchers, their industry were already innovating. To give you a few examples, China has reduced the energy intensity of its economy by over 60% since 1980 and expects to reduce it further by 20% by 2010. Another example here is India. India has increased its renewable energy target to 14 gigawatts of new renewable energy capacity by 2012. It is improving energy efficiency by 20% by the year 2016 to 2017 compared to 2005 levels. The examples continue, but that's why we asked the ministers in their intervention to talk about what they're already doing, but what we all need to do collectively. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we're a few months away from Copenhagen. We must have a deal. We must have a deal. We have no choice. The climate is changing right in front of us. The ministers and I were discussing in the holding rooms all the different examples we see in our countries about the different ways our weather and our climate is changing in our countries. The irony is, those of us who polluted the least, or probably not polluted at all, like the poor in Africa, will pay the highest price. I came here from Vietnam, the minister and I traveled together yesterday. The Prime Minister was telling me, they already estimate that 1/3 of the low-lying areas will disappear immediately. One of the top 5 countries to suffer if the climate worsens. We need to talk about climate justice. The poorest of the poor, the bottom billion, who committed less of the emissions, will pay the highest price. But this is not about finger pointing. This is about collective interest. How do we transfer technologies to the poor so that they can grow? At the same time, they follow a cleaner path. How do we finance that change? We need collective action. We need a deal in Copenhagen, just as the same way we need a deal for Doha. Trade matters, growth matters. That's the only way we'll fight poverty, but we can do it without polluting the earth. Thank you very much.